to another edition of the Métis Matters Radio Show, coming to you from CFRO 102.7 FM in the city of Vancouver on a nice 20-degree day here on the West Coast. And people are bustling about, doing their business here in the heart of the city of Vancouver. So I'm sure glad that you guys came in to tune us in today, I meant. And, of course, wherever you are right across the country, I hope all the snow is gone. And, of course, if the snow is gone, then you have another problem, floods. So I hear there's having their problems in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, other parts of the country, but we're hoping that that'll pass soon. Anyway, my name's Ken Fisher, and this is the Métis Matters Radio Show, and we're here today to talk to you about different issues happening within the Métis community in BC, Métis associations, Métis, well, I guess community is the best word because there's communities all over the place in British Columbia, as there is in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, at least the ones we recognize. But in the meantime, the consequence of the situation here in BC is constantly changing, and in some people's minds, it's in need of a big change. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit. But you can give us a call here if you have a question or a comment about the Métis in any way. 604-684-7561 is the number to call. 684-7561. Oh, 7581, pardon me. 604-68. The 604 is the area code. 684-7561. So give us a call. And, of course, I have a surprise guest in the studio today. I hardly knew you were coming. Mr. Keith Henry.
Well, thanks, Ken, for having us. And I just always have tried to help support the show and fill in some content when I can. And,
Well, it seems like one of the contents, excuse me, speaking of MNBC, is they have announced a by-election.
Yeah.
And they're going to have by-elections for the provincial women's rep. I found it ironic that they announced it and there's only a 14-day time frame. And, of course, surely Mr. Don Caverly, the Chief Electoral Officer, must be getting the message here somehow that he can get away with 14-day time frame for an election process. Even the federal government in the last election, that took over a month, took 35 or 36 days.
Well, I hate getting in on this because, but the fact is, Ken, you're right. The way the CEO, the Chief Electoral Officer, is supposed to operate the MNBC is through the legislation. And what we have is a piece of legislation called the Electoral Code, or the Electoral Act, or some people refer to it as. There's it's supposed to be a 30-day notification, and a number of steps need to be followed. I'm not 100% clear. I did have a quick glance at the notifications. I did see that 14-day notice. Yep. That doesn't seem to align at all with the Act. And the CEO, I believe, may or may not be following the rules that are actually in legislation. But, in all honesty, that just doesn't surprise me given the current situation we're all in right now. So. Yeah,
and of course the consequence of the 14-day rule is that I understood in some circles it's to get a criminal record check if you wanted to become a candidate. It's almost impossible to get it in 14 days. And then you have to pay your fee and all that. So, but the one interesting position that caught my eye is the one for the provincial women's reps, which they literally did out of her job by suspending her for no good reason. And now I'm wondering if she'd even think of running again, because if she did run again and win, they would suspend her again. And this is a consequence of poor legislation in place that allows them to ignore their own rules.
Well, I don't know that it's poor legislation in place. I think what the problem is people are misinterpreting the legislation for what it currently says in the Constitution and the various acts. These are elected positions, and they've been treated like they're somehow employees of a corporation, and they're not. These people that were elected on the provincial board are elected through a process, and the Constitution sets out 8 ways that a director can be suspended. To this day, I don't know that it's been all that clear about how those suspensions came about of the 3 board of directors. The women was one, which, as you say, is a consequence of today that we're having a by-election for the provincial women's rep. So the provincial women haven't had a voting seat on the board in just about a year and a half.
That's right.
The Northwest region is also one of the by-elections.
Prince Rupert, Terrace, and surrounding area.
And then there's a couple youth positions and a women's, another North Central women's representative. So there's 5 positions up for by-election. And, one of the things I just want to make sure everyone's aware of is that, think about what liabilities may or may not exist when you go into an organization that's millions of dollars in debt. And I mean, that's a legitimate reality. I make it public. I would never run for any organization, never mind MNBC. I mean, I wouldn't sit on the board of directors anywhere, considering the massive debt that these. And remember, as directors, once you sign on to that corporation, you're legally liable for what happens in that corporation.
Liable?
That's right.
Well, that's something that they surely must have thought about when they put the whole corporation into that kind of a situation.
Well, one of the things I've said from day one is that what's going to happen, and I believe this part of the long-term goal is these people will walk away and they will, pass along that liability to the next group of maybe unknowing leaders that walk into that organization holding the bag on a big debt.
Yeah, but knowing that they're running up the debt more and more, shall we say, month by month, wouldn't it be fair to say that they could be taken to court for that after the fact?
But the thing the problem with that, and you're right, they can. First of all, yes, you can do that. The next set of directors could do that, or citizens, you could have a class action suit. You can do this all sorts of ways.
And literally take their houses?
Literally, yeah, you can actually, and through civil claims, absolutely. Yep. The question though becomes, who's going to take that on and who's going to pay the legal fees to do that? And everyone knows that. I mean, we all sit back pretending that, we're armchair lawyers, and we're not.
We're not.
I mean, it costs money to do these things. Everyone knows that, and that's just an ongoing challenge we're going to have in our nation. And I don't know that it's going to get resolved anytime soon. I think it's this is the side of me that I'm not personal about it anymore. I've really tried to just be respectful of those individuals. But this is why we're starting a new organization, because who would run for an organization in this situation? I certainly wouldn't.
And the new organization is? Well,
we've been talking about the coalition. We are going to formalize a new organization, and people can come along as they want. It's the British Columbia Métis Federation.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, so it's an initial start. It's not everything. It's going to take a while for people to understand what we're doing and why. And truthfully, we're not here to fight MNBC anymore. We don't. There's no interest in that, because it's just counterproductive, and it's just dividing everyone.
The way I look at it, a new organization would invite other people to join and build, just like MPCBC and MNBC did. How many years back? And they just had to build their organization and get the people on side.
That's right, and that's why we're looking. We had the Métis Summit on April 16th, as many people were aware of, and we're going to be having the Métis Gathering 2011, and it'll be sort of titled "A New Beginning." Because we just feel it's time for another approach. Now, whether or not governments work with the BCMF or whatever is absolutely irrelevant to the work we're doing. We just feel that we got to start building something, and if it takes time, so be it. Because clearly, the direction we're going now is just doesn't seem to be helpful for anyone in the long run.
Okay, time out for a break, and we're going to go to a fiddler named Brent Peaky Coot. Long, strange name, but he's from Saskatchewan, good fiddler, and he's going to play a number called Big John McNeil, so stay tuned, we'll be right back. Okay, well, here we are, caught with our pants down. I'm still talking about email and other good stuff.
I don't know if we had our pants on, though, Ken. Come on now.
We're getting email from all over the country talking about the situation here in British Columbia and how the Board of Directors of the Métis Nation BC continues to ignore the overtures of a group called the Coalition of Concerned Métis Citizens. And they're supposed to have a debt recovery plan in place. We haven't heard in boo since, when was that, February, when we had the so-called Métis Nation Governing Assembly?
Yeah, that's right. It was actually, the Governing Assembly was February 18th to the 20th out at the school in Abbotsford. So it was the 19th was the actual day.
February, March, April, 2.5 months ago.
Just about 3 months here coming on shortly, and nothing. That's still, which is really sad because I certainly remember, the coalition and myself played a big part of trying to offer a debt recovery plan, and whether the MNBC and the Governing Assembly, accepted it was irrelevant to us. We just wanted to make sure that people had an understanding that we'd consulted with communities, and there was no need to hire consultants to write something that was already ready to go.
But they weren't about to accept the plan of the coalition, because by that they'd be admitting that they don't know what they're doing and they don't know how to recover, what a recovery plan, which, by the way, they never came up with, starting from way last September, October, November, December, January, February. They had 5 months to put something in place, and what do? They go out and hire 2 high-priced consultants who so far have come up with nothing.
Well, that's what bothers me about that situation. I'm the person that made the motion at the annual general meeting of the MNBC in September 2010. I made the motion, and I had people at the Governing Assembly trying to tell me what I said, or trying to interpret what that resolution was that was passed regarding the financial statements from MNBC. I was very clear in what I said, and I've got it recorded, so I know what it said. It was basically the statements were approved subject to a final approved debt recovery plan by the Métis Nation Governing Assembly. And then I added comments after saying I have faith that the Governing Assembly and the community leaders can properly mandate a plan. And that's what we left it at, just to move on in the interest of time, is what I did at that time. So today, just 9 months later, we're sitting here and there's absolutely nothing, and a lot of talk, but no action, nothing tangible.
Tell me about different Métis organizations, and you've been around long enough, and you're from Saskatchewan. Mm-hmm. Has this ever happened where another organization was created and to go against the existing corporation or organization in a province?
Oh yeah, it's happened all across the homeland, and not in every. There's been different. Whether it was the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples in their provincial affiliate organizations competing for who really represents the interests of the Métis people.
That was the UNN out
here.
Well,
United Native Nations is their chapter, if you will, here in British Columbia. But of course, the Métis Nation of Ontario at one time had a strong opposition from another organization, which was in Ontario at that time. Mm-hmm. And there's just been other organizations. In Saskatchewan, there's been different organizations that have started and stopped. We don't view ourselves, if I can be so bold, as the opposition. What we're saying is that we're just going to go on and have a new representative organization that people can join if they want. No different than a community association in Vancouver or anywhere. We just want to create a provincial representative organization so that people have somewhere else to go. MNBC represents the citizens. That's it. That's what their constitution says. People that have a citizenship card. Well, there's only 6,000 and some people that have a citizenship card today. So where's the rest of the political representation for the other 55,000 people that have self-identified?
Well, another thing that occurred to me, if the BC Métis Federation chooses, they can set who their members are, and they don't have to go by the Métis National Council definition. But I would think that if you wanted to, down the road, wanted to get on the good side of the Métis National Council and maybe get accepted as an alternative, it would get in their way. It would bother them if you were to start admitting people which they, in their definition, are excluded.
Yeah, we view ourselves requiring, there still has to be. The BC Métis Federation absolutely respects the need to have an objectively verifiable process for identification. So, but how that all comes about could be many different ways. And where we differ, I think, and where we're going to offer differences, Pauli did not define
the
Métis.
Pauli case from Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario,
which is funding all these registries and these organizations, didn't say it was only the Métis was defined in a certain way. It said by or adoption or other means was certainly in there. And so today, we think that there needs to be an open discussion. That's we started that at our April 16th meeting, and we're going to carry that on in our Métis gathering in June 11th here in Vancouver, where we're going to invite everyone to come and see what we've got in terms of membership ideas now, and what do they think. We're going to create a panel discussion on this and have a lot of time on this.
Well, assuming that the people from MNBC, the Board of Directors and others are listening to this program, wouldn't you think they would be perturbed by this eventuality, and get to the point where they might question the credibility of this BC Métis Federation?
They've been questioning the credibility of the CCMC from day one. They've been questioning the credibility of me. They've been That's absolutely irrelevant. We have a vision, and we're gonna realize our vision regardless of what MNBC or anyone else feels. We want to be sure, and in fact, if they're listening, I hope they attend. They were invited on April 16th, and we'd love to have them there on June 11th to help other people have a discussion. When's the last time we've had a real open summit or dialogue on Métis identification in this province? It's been, we haven't really talked about this since the national definition. And I was there when that national definition was passed in 2002.
In Edmonton.
I was at that meeting. I was there with Saskatchewan representatives.
You were a delegate?
I wasn't a delegate, but I was one of the technicians.
One of the 55.
Yeah, I wasn't one of the elected 55, but I was there when that resolution passed.
Mm-hmm. And, was it unanimous?
No, it wasn't. I don't recall if it was 100% unanimous.
At the McDonald Hotel in Edmonton.
Yeah, I believe there was maybe one or two abstentions. I can't remember, but it was pretty much, very strongly supported. But at the time when it was supported, it was because of what people were, interpreting of how the Powley case was coming out in the Métis harvesting case.
And
what
the interpretation
legal advice was.
The interpretation of who is and who isn't a Métis.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because they were talking as the court as it had gone through the tests. Yeah. The lawyers, of course, were providing guidance and advice about what the courts were looking for in terms of objectively verifiable. What was the historic connections you needed to prove? How did you prove it? I mean, there was a process to that before it came to Edmonton when that was eventually passed.
Well, so here we are today. That was 92. This is almost 9 years, obviously.
2002.
2002. What am I thinking in the last century? Anyway, 2002, and here we are in 2011. And 2012 will be 10 years. So the consequence of that is that there has been quite a bit of controversy because certain individuals and certain other organizations have taken umbrage with the fact that they have been left out, and maybe that's fair. I don't know, but I know there's a number of organizations that say, well, we don't need the Métis National Council to tell us that whether we're Métis or not.
And it's a fair statement. I mean, I certainly support. I want to be clear before I say this. I support the concept of provincial organization. Provincial organizations flowing into a national organization. But the fact is this today. The Métis Settlements Grand Council in Alberta, they certainly have no affiliation with the MNC or the MNA, and they have defined...
The Métis who?
Métis Settlements Grand Council.
Oh, of course not.
The Métis Settlements in Alberta, they have defined, they've got land, and they've got what I would refer to as somewhat more recognized
in
rights.
Northeast Alberta, yeah.
Well, no, it's just all across northern Alberta. There's a certain area, there's pockets all throughout Alberta.
There's at least 8 or 9 settlements.
That's right. That's right. And then, of course, you look at the Northwest Territories, their Métis people have actually defined rights.
Métis.
Absolutely, they do.
Well, you know this as well as me, but they used to belong to the Métis National Council, but they were told by the Métis National Council that they had to adhere to the definition process, right. And they refused.
And why would they when they've already got recognized rights? Governments already certainly deal with them in certain ways. And, as much as we need to have a conversation, we think of the eastern part of Canada. I know that it's not a lot of us, and even myself
east
at
of
times,
Ontario-Quebec border.
You look at the Labrador Métis Nation, they actually have defined Métis, what's defined as maybe different Métis than my Métis family, but they do have rights that have been established in the Labrador.
What about the Micmac from the Maritimes?
Well, it's all these things, and I think that what we're trying to show is that maybe it's time we open up our bit. I mean, when I look at what Powley was, it was such a historic case. It was so important for Métis people across this country. But really, today in my life, what's changed for me as a Métis person that does fit very well that sort of more narrow scope of Métis Red River type Western Canada definition, but it's meant absolutely not very much for me. In fact, there's no more the programs and services that were flowing. The Art of Strategy, Employment and Training came out in 1989, well before the Powley decision, which has always been one of our larger programs. Métis Housing's been around for a number of years before Powley. There's different health initiatives that have been around for long before Powley came out. So I'm just trying to figure out on the rights case. I struggle with this all the time. What does that really mean to me? And if it doesn't mean anything, then what are we fighting about? Why don't we open up and be thinking about what are all the different First Nations. First Nations in BC, 203 separate nations. It's massive.
Yeah, but you're trying to get the attention of people who are just leading their everyday lives. There's certain people who don't want to get involved in this kind of stuff. They just don't want to bother with it. But any thinking Métis will take a look at the situation here with 8 or 9 board members, 3 of which were suspended. One of the new guy, Terry Annison, has come back, but. Now, why don't you invite him to this next event of yours? Because he wasn't one of the ones that he got elected after the fact.
Well, they're all invited. They were invited to the regional sessions we held on our own dollars back in January and February. They didn't show up. We've invited them to the summit. We sent them I can assure you and all the listeners, those letters of invite went directly to their emails, and they have to decide whether they want to come or not.
Yeah, but somebody told me if you show up at this MNB or Coalition Summit, you're dead in the water, man.
Well, that's their choice. I mean,
but they must have been warned or told, don't show up there or else. Yeah. I would have to assume that somebody's calling the shots there at the MNBC.
Well, that's unfortunate. I mean, we wouldn't ever endorse that kind of style of leadership. I think that is just narrow-minded. I mean, why can't we get in a room and debate issues? There's nothing wrong with good debate. I mean, Ken, you and I have sat across from a table disagreeing about things, but you can still debate things in a respectful and fair manner.
In a logical manner.
That's right, absolutely.
Okay, well, on that note, let's take a little break. This is the Métis Matters radio show here on CFRO 102.7 FM. We're going to turn our attention to some music here by a fellow named Darren LaValle, and he's from Manitoba. So we're going to play here a number off his CD, Le Métis, and this one's called Cat Scratches, Chat Graffiné. We're back on the Métis Matters radio show in a tune by Darren LaValle from Manitoba. Cat Scratches it's called. Short, sweet. So, anyway, some of the big things that have happened lately is, Monday night. Look at the election. Look at the NDP taking 105 seats or something, kicking the heck out of the Bloc de Québécois. And Did you see this coming? The polls kind of said it.
Well, the federal election was pretty. It's permanently changed the landscape in Canada. I do believe that.
Absolutely. No.
You asked me if I saw it coming. I think I did. I think I certainly knew that the Liberals were in big trouble. I certainly have been outspoken about as I ran as Liberal candidate.
Well, like Nasty seemed like an intelligent guy. I kind of liked him, but he didn't have.
He didn't connect with people, and the challenge I think we had as Liberals, anyone of the supporters. I'm only speaking by myself, not on behalf of BCMF or anything. But no, the fact is. The message was never really clear, and quite frankly, Jack Layton really owned the agenda in terms of the left, side around helping families and the education and those fighting for those rights. The other side of it is
what happened in your riding.
The Conservatives won a riding. That's the second time it was a Liberal riding up until the last election in 2008.
I see.
MP by the name of Andrew Saxton from the Conservative Party came up, and he won it closely in the election
on Monday.
And then he won it. Liberals were second again, but he lost. The Liberals lost by a larger margin this time.
To which?
Andrew Saxton. So it's the North Van Seymour riding.
Confederate. What party?
Conservative Party. Yeah.
Okay, in my riding of Surrey North, Donna Cadman went down to stunning defeat to the NDP candidate.
She was missing in action, frankly. I mean, that was one of the criticisms that she had all throughout the election.
I was saying to somebody, I said, the least she could have done, and said, look, I'm not perfect. I'm a new MP. I did what I had to do. I'm ready to go back. But she did she was told right from the top, just stand pat, don't do nothing. I'm guessing, of course. And they figured she'd swoop in, but it didn't work.
No, but I guess it didn't matter at the end of the day. They won a majority. I mean, I guess third time at it, they deserved it, I guess. They ran it. I'm not happy about it, but that's just my own personal opinion.
Well, I'm a long-time voter in Canada, and of course, from the perspective of what used to be always Ontario or Quebec, a lot of people like the fact that the Prime Minister is essentially a resident of Calgary. Lives in the West. Yeah,
absolutely. And the one thing I will say, regardless of the outcome, at least we're stable for the next 4 years. We all know that that's a reality. I think that's something that everyone, I think, is probably even in the back of their minds thinking, well, that's at least one thing we don't have to worry about for the next 2 years or 3 years. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's one good thing. But boy, the dynamics of the NDP coming up with that strong as the official opposition really shocked me. And basically the Bloc is no longer a national party. You have to have 12 seats in the federal parliament to be a national party. So they've lost that standing too.
Don't forget the Green Lady from Sydney, BC.
I thought that was great. Elizabeth May. I'm not personally a Green party member, but I certainly don't disagree with a lot of their views.
A lot of people buy into what they're all about.
Well, you can't think of a better person that should have won a seat. I mean, they deserve a national seat. I mean, if you did it by, I remember you and I having these conversations years ago over rep by pop, and you look at their popular vote was 6%. They have over 1 million voters basically in Canada, and they didn't even have a seat. I mean, that does seem, somewhat.
So that's going to change for
sure. So at least they've got one. I don't know if that'll change much in terms of her at the next leadership debate when they deal with that.
I think they have to let her in, I think. But anyway, the point is she gets more money, too.
Well, I mean, she deserves. She's been working hard. I mean,
they'll fund it some way.
Yeah, no, I think it's great.
But the NDP, are we talking telephone? As you know, ladies and gentlemen, we accept calls at 604-684-7561, and we take calls. So we have a caller. So,
well, hey, Joe.
Joe Palooka or who?
Joe DeJarle.
Joe Palooka.
Yeah, I'm dating myself when I say Joe Palooka.
No, brother.
That used to be an old comic strip.
Well, you got me there.
You're not that old, Joe.
Yep. Hey, Keith, I have a question for you.
Yep.
Or it's a comment and then a question. I'm interested to know what you think about, like, we were talking about the election there and Prime Minister Harper and all that. Are you familiar with Tom Flanagan?
Absolutely.
Can we discuss that for a bit?
Sure, no problem.
I think that's a significant issue with regarding First Nations and Métis and Inuit people in Canada. What is the background of Tom Flanagan with respect to the Prime Minister?
Well, my understanding, I mean, I'm only going from what I've read and some of the research myself. But Tom Flanagan, for those listeners that don't know, is really been one of the Prime Minister's, advisors or aides in different settings. Thomas Flanagan, for those for folks, is he works out of the University of Calgary. Last I heard, and he's an academic. And he's written a number of articles over the years. And when I was in University of Saskatchewan in the early 90s, and I'm a Métis Studies major, we did a lot of reviewing of his articles to understand what was sort of some of the policy landscape out there. And I can say that for those that don't know, the fact that this guy is in somewhat of the inner circle with the current government is going to be a challenge for particularly the Métis people. His theories and a lot of his academic writings are really around the fact that Métis don't have Aboriginal right and title, and they're really nothing, that really should be just, for lack of a better word, brought in with the non-Aboriginal Canadians, and really that we're not really a distinct culture or nation of people that would sort of be, should be recognized in terms of treaty rights. So it's these kind of things that I don't think a lot of our Métis people are aware of, and I don't, I'm not, of course, not trying to disrespect the man, but he's done a lot of work around dispelling the rights of the Métis people, particularly, and he's certainly not friendly to the Aboriginal agenda in any way. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything else, Joe, on that, but that's sort of my 50,000-foot quick view of it, is that is, now that there's a majority government, it's those views that we're going to have to figure out. How is this federal government going to deal with policy on Métis people? And I'm quite concerned about that.
Well, he mentioned the Aboriginal people, so does that include us?
Well, yeah, but a lot of people, what they say and what they do translates often to different things. I mean, there's no new money in programs and services right now, and there hasn't been under the previous government when they were a minority. Mm-hmm. And those programs, whether it's healthcare or dealing with treaties, or there's no new investments in dealing with these things. And so I know people that are working in the Treaty Commission right here in BC, and the feds have not really ponied up resources to move those treaties along, from what I understand. And so those are very serious challenges for us. And unfortunately, this government knows, as well as maybe other governments before him, that the Aboriginal vote isn't enough to get us kicked out, so we're okay with letting those things find their way through the courts.
Okay, well, listen, Joe, the fact of the matter is, what do you think of to change the subject for a moment, of the BC Métis Federation? How successful do you think they can be?
Well, I'm excited about what I'm hearing, and I'm looking forward to change in that sense. And I think that it's a great time for the BC Métis Federation, and I think there's a real opportunity. I think frankly there's a political vacuum. There's a lack of representation with regarding that broader base. I think that, there has been polarization. When academics like to wrestle about these topics, they talk about tribalism, and then they talk about pan-Métis organizations. If we look at the history of the Métis in British Columbia, I mean, we've seen this. If you look at the history, there's been a story of competing tensions. When we talk about like the Mackenzie and the Union and some of these other organizations that have come through. And perhaps a lot of listeners don't know that there's been a lot of interplay between the First Nations and the Métis, usually in the political or legal trenches, but they've worked their way out into the public domain as well. And it's always been represented politically, of course. So what we've seen this overlapping loyalties and different things that have happened over the years. And there's been pendulum shifts, back to this, like you talk about tribalism, and then you talk about Métis organizations. Right now, the Métis organization, that's the dominant is the Métis National Council, but this hasn't been always the case. It's been shifting between these tensions over the years, and it's an interesting time, I think. What are your thoughts, Keith?
Well, you asked me. I think it is interesting because I don't know what relevance a lot of these national Aboriginal organizations, I think we need them. I just struggle to find it many times, like what really is their role and how do they help move the agenda. I don't see the agenda moving. And when I say the agenda, I mean how do we deal with the socio-economic issues for Métis people at a federal level, and what rights. Like the Métis, remember, are we a federal responsibility under how the Indian Act has been extended to deal with the Inuit in the North in the 1930s, or are we a provincial responsibility? And we've been a political hot potato, and no one deals with it. And at the National Council level, we don't even have a constitution federally yet to this day.
And with the preponderance of people finding out about their Métis identity, there's thousands more people here in BC in the last 25 years are now aware that they are Métis and are coming out of the woodwork to declare that they are proud to be Métis. So that's going to make a difference overall. But we have to get them organized to be able to become a force to either deal with the provincial and federal government, because, MARR, the Ministry of Aboriginal Relations and Reconciliation, sitting there in Victoria, needs to pay more attention to the Métis and what we're all about.
I think there's another challenge here, Keith and Ken. A lot of the Métis organizations have basically mirrored Western institutions in structure, and I think the challenge will be as to move forward whether an Indigenous context starts to come back into the discussion in terms of how it influences structure.
Absolutely. That's great, Joe, and it's exactly that kind of conversation we're going to carry on the June 11th meeting, Saturday, June 11th, that the CCMC, now evolving into the British Columbia Métis Federation, will be having at the Coast Cole Harbor, and it'll be on our website. And Joe, I know you'll be there, and I look forward to hearing your views, because membership will be a big issue that we're going to talk about, and we're going to open up that discussion through a panel. So I look forward to seeing you as part of that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for calling in, Joe. And we're going to go right back to music here on the Métis Matters Radio Show on CFRO. You can call us here, 604-684-7561, if you get inclined to do that. Right now we're going to hear a nice number called 3 Men on a White Horse by Darren LaValle, Métis fiddler from Manitoba. Well, we're back on the Métis Matters Radio Show here on CFRO, and that one was called 3 Men on a White Horse. Now, where it got that name, I don't know. But anyway, I want to remind you that this is the Métis Matters Radio Show here on CFRO 102.7 FM, and I'm going to have to look into that to see why Star Choice isn't being heard in the city of Calgary, because we have many listeners there, as we do right across the West, including Manitoba. So the fact of the matter is, I'm going to remind you, my name's Ken Fisher, and sitting across from me today is Mr. Keith Henry, the... what's your title?
Well, I'm an executive committee member with the Coalition of Concerned Métis Citizens, who is now looking at evolving into the British Columbia Métis Federation.
Exactly. And now, the Constitution of the Manitoba Métis Federation, have you had a look at that to see if it's similar to what might be a good one for us?
Well, we've looked at all of the governing members, actually, and some of them work under bylaws that have evolved into some form of a constitution or another. Manitoba certainly has a number of interesting ideas. So does Alberta, quite frankly. Each province, although we're similar, does do things a little bit different, and so we're working our way through developing that governance. But again, that's something that we want to get an initial sort of set of standard bylaws to some extent off the ground, and then we're going to be having panel discussions in June at our gathering on June 11th. We're going to be putting together. So, and that's so we can invite people to help us shape the organization the way it needs to be shaped, and so that's really our goal right now.
Well, I guess one of your biggest concerns, if you're going to put into effect a constitution, have you considered recall and things like that?
Absolutely. What we've tried to do, the working sort of group, we have a group of about 15 volunteers that have been added and helped in one way or another. And the idea is that we look at all the mistakes that we see right now at the provincial level. We can't fix them over at MNBC. So when we create a new organization, how do we make it so that those things don't happen again? So if we want to have a recall, what is it going to take to do that? If we want to, how can we make sure that a board of directors, if the BCMF carries on, which we believe it will, they can't go borrowing money without getting a vote of support from the members. These things need to be in place. And those are just two of many small examples of things that you can't suspend directors. They're elected. I mean, these are things that you can't sue members. These are things we're going to make sure is in the initial drafting of the bylaws so that people know that this isn't just same old, same old. It's something new. And as we evolve a constitution, we need to talk about it. Another thing we need to talk about, frankly, is what defines a Métis community. I mean, MNBC in our current legislation says it's defined by 25 citizens, and it actually doesn't say a community is defined by legally being incorporated. Yet we've got organizations being kicked out because they weren't legally incorporated. While today there are, I know for a fact on this show, I can tell you without a doubt, we know right now there's about 5 organizations in this province that are not incorporated. Yet the MNBC hasn't kicked them out. So
they have a double standard.
Well, exactly. So we want to make sure going forward as we evolve the BCMF, let's define communities. What is community? Is it a family group? Is it a number of people in a municipal location? Why? Because if you actually look at all you know this better than anyone can. If you look at all these chartered community associations throughout the province, I mean, how many have started and stopped over the last 10 years? I mean, it's what, 50, 40?
Well,
it's quite a few.
Even in the Surrey area, there was the Louis L. Métis Association. It was the first one I was involved. Then it turned into Métis Council, and then the Lower Mainland Métis Association, and there was just a half a dozen before in the United Heritage Métis Association before Nova came into being in 2003. I was the first president, and I've been president ever since. But the point is, there was so much, petty politics going on, I would say.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is say, look, how do we not, I mean, we'll never be perfect on everything we do, but how do we fix those issues? I mean, those are serious pitfalls. And so, I mean, that's something that I think needs to happen. I mean, it's just not, we just can't keep carrying on trying to fix something that can't be fixed because people don't want to see the facts before them.
Well, it's got if in fact the BC Métis Federation puts rules in place, they got to make sure, like you said, they can't suspend their elected members and they without pay and take everything away from them, all their rights to represent the people who elected them, and before that, for such an asinine reason as insubordination. You can't talk back to the people at the top, or they could run you down for insubordination. Sounds like a military thing.
Well, I mean, I see what, if we look at let's look at the federal government. When Helena Georges coincidentally lost her seat, got kicked out of cabinet from the Conservative and became an independent, they didn't suspend her and throw her out of government. She still had a right to represent the people, so she still got paid for her job.
Yeah.
She was still able to be an independent. So I mean, it's not like we're saying do anything different than what we see out there in I guess, the broader landscape. We just want to make sure people realize this is a change. It's not the same old. It's absolutely, we got to turn our thinking around, upside down, and we got to really stop stuff from happening. The number one person in this whole structure is the citizen, or the member, nobody else.
The Métis citizens and their rights.
If we're not connecting with those people, what's the point of these organizations?
Right, but sooner or later you're going to have to approach the governments, provincial and federals, and try to get them to the point where they accept the credibility of the BC Métis Federation.
Absolutely,
got to be a goal.
Yeah, absolutely. There will be a time when that'll happen, but it takes time, and we've got to make sure that Métis people in British Columbia want the BC Métis Federation going that road. This is another, of course, important meeting for us. The next meeting, June 11th. This will be another telltale sign. Do people really care about a different organization and trying to build something that makes sense? That's going to be important for us, all of us.
Well, in some people's minds, I've talked to a couple who think that's counterproductive, but I said, well, what choice is there? If, in fact, the present board of directors, 8 of them, and maybe 9, they just won't listen. They don't respond. There's no communication. It's just an absolute stalemate.
Well, I mean, I would only say to those people, I only offer an olive branch to those people, because the fact is, this isn't about fighting MNBC anymore. It's not about being counterproductive, but I have every right to be represented by the leadership I want. That's a democratic right in this country, and I don't believe that, for me, that's being respected or followed in any way. And we all have a right to say our opinions.
Right.
I don't think that's a fair statement at MNBC anymore.
Anyway, here we are at 8 minutes to the hour. Where's the hour gone? You were talking about all this political stuff, and probably people are wondering, where's the music? So we're going to go right back to music by a young, talented guy who plays the fiddle from Saskatchewan. Kelly Atchingham is his name. And we're going to hear a number called Black Mountain Rag. That was Kelly Atchingham, and this guy is a crackerjack fiddler. I'll tell you, he's got the beat, Saskatchewan style. That was called Black Mountain Rag. Anyway, I'll turn right away to the fact that Métis Matters radio show is here every Wednesday at 5 for your enlightenment, for a little bit of entertainment, of course. And of course, we always look for new guests, and one of the guests from the Nova Métis Heritage Association in Surrey, one of our members, is an MLA. He's from Fraser Valley, and his name is Mark Dolland. We're going to have him in as a guest.
Yeah, that's great. Mark looks forward to being on the show. He was at the summit, And he wanted to come and connect more with the grassroots Métis people, and we invited him to be on the show on Wednesday.
Took up that challenge. I'm glad.
Yeah, Wednesday, May 25th. For those listeners that want to listen to his I guess story, and he's going to talk, I guess, a bit about being Métis. He discovered being Métis a bit later in life, but how that how he sees his role within the provincial government, which is I always believe that Métis people do need to get involved in provincial and federal levels of government.
Yeah, well, he's a Liberal MLA sitting in Victoria, and I think they tried to recall him, but it didn't work.
No, he's got his hands full there.
That's true. But anyway, so a lot of the Liberals in the HST issue, let's face it, we're going to go to a vote soon. I'm not going to ask you for your opinion, but some people call HST the horrible sales tax. So that's a question of whether you're benefiting or you're not benefiting. So this campaign is going to go on over the next few weeks or months.
Yeah, and the bottom line is the HST. I guess whether my opinion one way or the other, the fact is if the government had just been more clear about how they were going to implement it, that's the challenge we see today. And I honestly don't know if it's going to get defeated, because I think people have come to accept it. I mean, I just feel that it's hard to say one way or the other right now.
Absolutely. So anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, I just want to thank you, Ken, and just encourage listeners to go to the Coalition website to get information about the Métis Gathering. It'll be called 2011, A New Beginning is the title of the I guess one-day conference.
How can they contact the Coalition website?
Well, you just go. It's www.mnbcagm.wordpress.com, and if you go there, you can certainly post your comments, give feedback, and of course the agenda will be going up on the site here shortly. So
when are you going to get an address? Stuff like that.
Well, we're going to be doing that is once the BC Métis Federation becomes legally incorporated, which of course is being worked on as we speak, then of course the coalition will be transitioning into a more formal website and these sorts of things.
Very good. Well, thank you once again for coming in. I'm sure a lot of people were very interested in what you said, and we look forward to having you on another time.
Okay, thanks very much, Ken.
Thank you very much. And of course, my name's Ken Fisher, and of course it's just about coming up to 6 o'clock, so you can always contact me at the Nova Métis Heritage Office in Surrey, 604-634-0119. Email me, novamétis@shaw.ca. Anytime, any place, and we're always looking for new guests. So if you're interested in being a guest on this radio show and you got a story to tell or something to say, by all means, get a hold of me, 604-634-0119. And this is all I can say now is have a nice day, beautiful day here in BC. Tune in again next Wednesday at 5, same time, same station. See you then at that time. Thanks for listening.